Welcome into this episode of the NiceJob Podcast. If you like what you hear, please like the video and don't forget to subscribe to get new episodes as they're released. Remember, you can get the entire episode on our podcast platforms. All right, let's see who our guest is today.
Hey, I'm Bryan Kaplan. Do you have your finger on the pulse of your finances in your business?
Welcome in to this edition of the NiceJob Podcast. We are so glad you're here, taking the step to make yourself a better business owner, a better person. This episode in particular, and the guest is going to join me today, we had a couple conversations. We talked about a variety of different topics. He really can touch on a lot of different things, a very smart individual, but the topic we're going to talk about today is certainly right in his wheelhouse. And one thing I love about kind of researching this individual's style is he puts it in a way that is very informative, but really no matter what hesitation, what sort of thing you might have in your head. Welcome into this episode of the NiceJob Podcast. He's going to be able to connect with you and you're here, give you some please great steps to move forward. So I'm very excited about our conversation today. Welcome into this episode of the NiceJob Podcast. If you enjoy it, please like the video and don't forget to subscribe to get new episodes as they are released.
I'm doing very well, Sean. You've painted some very large shoes for me to fill here.
You know what? And now let's see who our guest is today. Overstating, right? Because it's difficult sometimes if you're in a position where you're just sharing knowledge in general, let alone if you have a consulting program or things like that, to kind of meet people where they are, right? Because some concepts I don't want to say just difficult to understand, but the more you get experience with it, then the more that kind of surface fear comes off. And particularly, we're on the topic we're going to talk today, is there's always a little bit of numbers involved. And I know there's some people, especially in some skill trades, things like that, they're like, I work with my hands and I get in there. I'm not a math guy, right? The old joke, I was told there'd be no math. And I feel like the way you kind of approach things is very much connecting and things like that. To kind of start with that in a sense, as you kind of progress through your career and got to where you are now, how do you think that was kind of developed through the journey where you got to a point where you're like, I can help other people, and it's actually what I kind of want to do. I want to make sure to kind of spread some message or spread some techniques and really help people get a leg up. How'd that develop in you?
I think from way back when, I've always had kind of that mentoring and coaching component in me, and it was just something that I did naturally, and I think it was very unconscious. Like I was very unconsciously kind of coaching people around me. And I've always had that ability to kind of share some knowledge and wanted to really share it. I think the important part here is that I had that drive to do it, which was something that I brought to every company that I worked in. And I would tend to get a lot of phone calls from friends and colleagues in the business that knew me in the Toronto area here, asking me questions all the time. And I started to think, I was currently working as the general manager of a renovations company here in Toronto, and there's nowhere really else to go when you're a general manager of a company. I mean, there's no other position other than founder or president or owner. So, and I think I had done that. I'd kind of been there and done that and had done it for, 2 decades, and decided that I could take the cues from what the world was kind of showing me, which was that people did have a lot of questions. People are on different paths of their journey. As you've mentioned, I do my best to kind of meet people where they're at. And I think that's just the recognition that knowing that everyone's in a different place, but that ultimately I know how hard this business is. And I know how easy it is to watch your profit evaporate within a split second. Meanwhile, you might have been on a project for, a week, a month, a year, or, any time frame in between there. And for me, that's something that I'm just incredibly passionate about helping people not do, which is, to ensure that they're profitable. So not making the profit that you deserve. So that was kind of a bit of a foray 3 years ago for me to say, I'm going to leave a very stable position with a great salary, and I'm going to go on my own with $0 of income and start helping people. And it's been an absolute blast ever since I left. There's always a bit of a safety net when you leave a position and start something else, but it's been a great time, and I've met a ton of different people, and hopefully I'm trying to be humble here and not make myself the hero of the story, but to say that I have made a difference in a lot of people's lives, and I hope that that they continue to take what we've worked on together and grow as well. So.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely can tell. I like how you said there. Like, I don't make myself the hero of the story, but sometimes when you're helping someone, that's a little bit when people ask maybe why you do these things. That's maybe the first thing they think of, right? It's like, oh, we probably get a little buzz from helping people, but it's actually a bit deeper than that, right? It's really about understanding kind of the journey through, but also a pure recognition of there's very few people that have all the required kind of skills and intangibles to do it purely on their own without taking any sort of even like feedback, having any sort of debate, any sort of discussion. And it's one thing that I try to press upon of like, it's not the old like asking for help, but sometimes just getting a different perspective might not completely change your worldview, but it might just fill in one piece of that puzzle or give you one little extra way of looking at something. So, just based on, the things that you're doing, consulting, kind of working with these people, it's not like, you're coming in like, hey, I'm not trying to be the hero there. And you might be, thanking me for years on end. But realistically, you also get a lot out of this by being able to see these different situations, kind of evolve your thinking as well, because you wouldn't be successful, no one would be successful if you're like, well, this is my one idea and it doesn't evolve over time. You mentioned, profit and profitability, and we talk about meeting people where they are. So I want to kind of start with a dumb question. And the reason I want to do that is because I think it's kind of a good springboard. When we talk about profit and profitability, they're related, but are they the same?
I mean, essentially, yeah, profitability would be the act of doing it, whereas profit would probably be the tangible results. It's funny, I've never been asked that question, and I don't know. I think you stumped me here. I'm trying to think of what the difference, what I'd actually clarify, like if I was defining these in a spelling bee, using them in a sentence, how would I use them? I think profitability is just really like, yeah, I think it's the act. It's almost maybe even like a mindset, if you will, as opposed to the tangible component, which is if I say I profited on a project, that means that there was an actual tangible result there that I can kind of look at.
Well, I always thought of it, and perhaps I could be wrong in this way. Profit obviously you talk about is the action. Profitability is kind of the process in a sense. But I look at that you can make a profit off of something, but if it's not sustainable and able to kind of react to perhaps changes in expenses or something like that, then you're not really in a profitability like sort of state, right? And you're not really practicing profitability. You've made gains in this short term, but not quite the long term. Is that kind of an apt definition, or at the very least just perhaps a way to not get you tripped up if you're seeing a positive dollar value, to understand that might be a little deceptive in some regard, that you have to look at the whole picture?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few different lenses that I could answer this in, and I think it's a great point because, just on a very granular level, you can make a profit on one project, but it doesn't mean that you're actually profitable overall in your construction business. And also, touching upon that being more of a mindset and being like, if you're going to be profitable or you're going to employ the mindset of profitability, there's a lot of different components that have to come into play here. It's not just all about money, right? It's really what we're talking about is kind of that growth mindset, is understanding, as you said a moment ago, let's just take this one thing like that I heard that I'm going to use to improve or iterate on my process, and it's going to help me grow in a different way. I always like to, I read a lot, so I throw out a bunch of book references, and for anybody that's interested and hasn't already read Adam Grant's book called Think Again, it's a kind of just made me think about it right now, pun intended, because he talks a lot about, one of the main premises in the book is the concept of rethinking, which basically means that I think as a guy in the industry, I've heard this tons and tons of times, and I've said this tons and tons of times because we have a lot of ego that drives our thought process sometimes, and we'd say, well, this is the way we've always done it, so why would we be open to thinking about a different way? And I think later on, as I got older and more mature in the business, I recognized how there are a multitude of ways to get to the desired outcome that you're looking for, and not just the one way that you've always done it. And sometimes listening to people around you is the best thing that you can do. So that is really one of the central premises of that book, and I think it's a great read for anybody that wants just to, kind of read a book from, he's a functional psychologist, teaches at Wharton in the US, and does a great job of presenting a bunch of different examples to help you kind of break what they call overconfidence cycles. This is the way we've always done it type of thing. And to your point, Sean, speaking about like, what is this one thing that I could just take to help rethink my process a little bit, or rethink the way I'm doing something, which, makes me not just profitable, but puts me in this mind state of profitability.
And is there is there a common either mistake or trip up or something that happens kind of early on that maybe puts entrepreneurs kind of on the wrong path towards profitability, but isn't as, like, obviously not as simple as like, oh, well, I didn't make money the first couple times out? Is there something, like I said, that's more deceptive that looks good? Is there anything that, that you could kind of share with us that, like, hey, I want to break down this scenario that if this is what your thing looks like, you might not be built for long-term success? Is there an example that comes to mind?
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole pile of them, but I'd say if I'm thinking back to even my own journey when I first started in kind of this remodeling or renovating space, I think, we don't have a lot of confidence at the beginning. Even if you're a confident person, which I've always been, you don't have a lot of confidence in what you know or you don't know because you don't really know a lot. Let's be honest with each other here. Like, I didn't know anything when I started, really. I kind of fell into the business, and I think that's how a lot of us get into any, home services business that you're in. I think it's either something that you come across or you just start doing it and you're starting to figure it all out. So I think from the very beginning, one of the key central pieces I try to help people understand is that, we can't charge our clients. We can't come up with our pricing based on what the audience, vis-a-vis your clients or your potential clients, think something should cost. You have to get those answers for yourself. And there's a whole series of ways that we do that. But, again, just keeping it high level for a second, you'll always have to value or appreciate and respect the value that you bring to the situation and not let the audience just tell you what it should be. So that comes in the form of, doing free estimates, where there's this expectation that we're supposed to just do these and not get paid for them. And this is really sort of a core central focus that I work on with people, because it's, again, speaking to this profitability mindset of, like, not letting, this Mr. and Mrs. Homeowner kind of reflect for you how you should operate your business, because they have no idea what it takes for you to be profitable or live in, the mind state of profitability. And
perhaps you're now looking to take that next step, right? Mm-hmm. Are there some indicators you should look for when it comes to the profitability sense that show you that, this is kind of how you can take a next step, or you're able to take the next step, or perhaps, hey, whoa, I know you're excited, but take a look at these numbers in particular, or take a look at our process in particular. It's not quite ready for the next step. So what are some indicators as you're starting to grow, maybe looking for more growth, that you're in a good position to do so?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's a very broad question, because there's a lot of different things that we really need to have in place before we grow. I think consistently what I see is people get excited and try to grow their business quickly, and they get a little bit romantic about having a certain gross revenue or a certain number of team members on their staff or whatever it is. And the first thing I would just say is to very high level is, Gary Vee would say, don't get romantic about how you got here. But I would say, don't get romantic about where you're going. And in other words, don't fall in love with the concept. Look at what the data is actually telling you. So if you ask me, hey, what's a key indicator that we have to make sure that we have in check, is, we're talking about being profitable, but it really comes down to knowing your numbers, right? And knowing your numbers has a very, very broad lens here. I mean, there's a lot of different things. I teach an entire course on knowing your numbers in construction businesses. And so there's some basic KPIs or key performance indicators that we would traditionally look for, but ultimately, if you don't have, on a very high level, if you don't have your finger on the pulse of your finances, in other words, if you can't tell me what your gross profit is right now, what your company expenses are to your overall income, and what your net profit is in your brand, then you are not ready for growth. Because until you have, those are very high level KPIs, until you even know those numbers like the back of your hand on an ongoing basis, what it tells me is that you don't have a proper bookkeeping and accounting, sort of system in place to actually get that information in real time. I've seen this time and time again where people go to scale, and because they don't have that part figured out, you can't measure the success or the failure as you're going, right? We look at the industry or the world of sports. Sports is run by data, right? We're talking, especially we got the Olympics come up, you start talking about like hundredths of a second. I mean, that's how the data is crunched. It's not different in a construction business, really any business, to be honest with you. There are metrics that we want to watch, because as you start adjusting different levers, bringing on 3 new team members, setting up a new division of your company, adding 3 more trucks on the road, whatever type of component that you're going to add in there, you've got to be judging this against how you were performing before you made that change. So if you do not have that system in place to get your job cost and just your overall company numbers in real time so that you can monitor this, well then scale is really the last thing that you want. You need to get that part solved first before you can actually grow and then sustainably grow for the future. The other thing I would just add on here from a higher level kind of thing is I always like to ask people, like, why do you want to grow? And I'll get on a call with somebody and they'll say, we're doing maybe 3 million or 4 million or whatever the number is right now. It could be 300,000 to 400,000. There's a wide range in construction businesses out there. And they'll say, I want to get to 10 million, or I want to get to 5 million, or I want to get to 1 million, whatever the target is. And I'd say, that's great. Why? And help me understand what's the drivers for you getting there. And that's kind of, again, don't get romantic about where you're going. Just, understand exactly why you're doing what you're doing, because one of the things that I help to mirror for people is that where you are right now, your life looks like a certain way, right? Your days are structured the way they are structured. You have either direct client, if you're an owner operator, you're directly related to the client and producing the work. When you start to scale, that changes. Your relationship in your business to your customers, to your team members, to your vendors, to your trade partners, that all changes. And we want to get really clear about what you want your days to look like, because it's directly related to the type of business that you're building and the scale that you might want to grow towards.
Yeah, and I guess along those same lines would be looking at your overall goal from a number standpoint, but then an outcome standpoint. Because there are some people that are like, what I want to do with this business is I want to keep growing it and I want to sell it at this point. And there's other people that are like, I want to get it and I just want to be able to kind of walk away and have it run in the background. This is going to be a thing I'm either passing down to somebody or, heck, when I kick the bucket, they can do whatever they want with it. And I would assume that those two different types of outcome probably have a different level of profitability, or kind of a different, I don't say method of scaling in a sense, but almost certain things that you want to kind of ensure for those two different outcomes. Is there anything that comes to mind that you will love to share, that kind of that separates those two things? Like, hey, if you're looking to sell, right? If you're looking to kind of get up and then become attractive to a buyer, versus if you're just trying to ensure, there's never no stress in your life. You know what I'm saying? Like, you're just trying to ride off into the sunset. Is there a key pivot, or is there something that's more important for one outcome than the other?
Yeah, it's always a great question, and it's funny because I'm connected to tons of other coaches across Canada and the US, and I'm in a mastermind group with 10 others, and one of the individuals is specializing in exit planning, and that's that concept of, hey, I'm going to start this business, I'm going to build it, and then I'm going to have an exit. I'm going to sell this business. And the interesting thing is that that's really just packaging, is really what it comes down to. If you want to run or work in a business that runs you, then continue doing what you're doing. If it's unorganized and chaotic and all of that, because that goal achieved. If you want to build a business that you can be proud of, that can run with you, if you got an email today, which we all get these spam emails, if you got an email that was legitimate that said, hey, you want a vacation to Hawaii, but you have to leave Monday, would you be able to go? And I think the concept there that we always talk about is, how do you move from the central conduit, how do you move from the hub of your construction business to a spoke in the wheel? And meaning that you're just contributing to the overall spinning of the wheel as opposed to being the central axis by which it spins. And whether you're going to be building this business to exit, whether you're building it for a certain lifestyle or whatever it is, the goal should always be to try to decentralize as best you can so that you aren't that central conduit. A lot of business owners are the ones that get the phone calls for every single thing that's going wrong, whether it's a trade, having an issue on your project, whether it's material, supplier calling you and saying, hey, where should we drop this, or arranging a delivery or whatever it is, or a client calling you with a question or a concern. A lot of business owners are really the center piece of that wheel. So whether you're, again, coming back to the question, if you're building the business for a specific reason, the goal should always be that you're not the central piece of it, because you're not really leveraging your own time really well as a business owner. it's kind of like that concept of, are you working on a $10 activity or are you working on a $1,000 activity? And it's not, I don't really subscribe to the work smarter, not harder kind of language, to be honest with you. But the concept of, I like using the financial equivalent to it, because a lot of us work on these $10 and $20 per hour activities, as opposed to these $1,000 per hour activities, which is business development, which is systemizing processes, which is moving ourselves from the central, part of our business to the periphery, so to speak. So that's where, we will really grow in a sustainable way, that then you have options. You have options to have an exit. You have options to bring other people in, to bring a partner in, to reduce your role, to be, a silent partner, there's lots of different things that you can do. But if you are the centerpiece of it, you're very limited in what you can do.
Which is sometimes a hard pill to swallow, like you will always be, but the spoke is a pivotal part of the wheel, right? Without those,
absolutely,
one thing is spinning, but there's no progress, nothing's really going. So it's almost in a sense of kind of reshifting your mindset of understanding that, yeah, you are definitely a key part of the driving force, but they said if you're that center hub, then it's going to be, there's going to be more difficulty, and it's going to be much harder for it, to really go if spokes start falling down. But if you get yourself a good solid core that's not you, and know that's running, then you're able to kind of pivot. And I love the kind of financial mindset, because the work smarter, not harder, I think it's so buzzwordy at some point that it's kind of lost a little bit of its meaning, at this point. So if someone wants to do that, I want to find out more about you, more than what you're doing, or get in touch, where can we direct them towards? And any link or anything you said here, we'll have included in the description below on the various platforms. So where can people get in touch with you?
Yeah, I appreciate that. So I'm very active on social media, specifically on Instagram, which is @constructionconsulting.co. And then on LinkedIn, if you just search for Bryan Kaplan, Bryan with a Y and Kaplan with a K, but as you said, you'll put the link down there. You can search for me on LinkedIn. I post a lot of information there as well, a lot of blog articles that go up onto LinkedIn. And then the website as well, constructionconsulting.co. And that's a great place to kind of learn more about me, learn more about what I offer, and even hop on a free strategy session and we'll just chat about your business.
Absolutely excellent. Bryan, thank you so much for spending the time with us today here on the Nice Job Podcast. It was an absolute pleasure having you on the show.
Thanks so much, Sean. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much for checking out the video. Remember, you can listen to the full episode of our podcast on Spotify, iTunes, Buzzsprout, or wherever you get your podcasts. Here on YouTube, I want to invite you to subscribe by clicking right there, or you can check out 2 other videos. One, our most recent podcast, and the other to learn a little bit more about NiceJob. So click one of those things, and I can go home.